I am Eloise Hayes, I am 72, and tonight, beneath Charleston's copper sky, I finally understood my place in my own son's story. The air was thick with the scent of magnolia drifting from the river, mingling with the faint salt of the harbor. Charleston evenings carry a certain weight, slow, golden heavy with history, with secrets tucked into the creaking floors of old homes, and whispers of past generations lingering in the air. I had worn a pale silk dress, something my mother might have chosen in her youth, and pearl earrings she had given me decades ago. I wondered if they still carried the weight of meaning, or if they were simply relics of memory, reminders of a past where people knew my name, respected it, and treated it as if it mattered. From the front lawn, the quartet played under twinkling string lights. The music floated gently across the warm air, soft and inviting, a soundtrack for celebration, laughter, and promises of futures that seemed bright and inevitable. This night was supposed to be about family, pride, laughter, and union. But as I stepped into the room behind the kitchen, I realized the stark truth. This night was a reminder of my absence, my invisibility. I was not led to the long table at the center of the reception, surrounded by friends, colleagues, and acquaintances. I was guided through a side door into a cramped, overheated room where the tile radiated the day's warmth. Servers in crisp white shirts passed by me with trays of oysters, glasses of champagne, their shoes tapping lightly against the tile, voices hushed, eyes flicking my way before moving on. Some offered polite nods, others avoided my gaze. The table I was shown was wedged between a rolling cart stacked with plates and a swinging kitchen door that slammed with each trip. The room smelled faintly of butter, citrus, and polished wood, a strange mix that made me feel trapped and yet oddly alert. Harper entered like a storm, wearing her lace gown, all teeth and diamonds, a performance of effortless possession. She did not see me, not truly. Her gaze passed over my shoulder as if I were wallpaper. "The kitchen help can eat back here," she said, just loud enough for the servers to hear. Some shifted uneasily, pretending to focus elsewhere. Others stole glances toward me, unsure of what to do. I caught sight of Lucas through the open doorway. My son, my only child, surrounded by men discussing a new property deal. His cufflinks gleamed in the warm light as he adjusted them, smiling and nodding at the right moments. He had seen Harper's performance. He had seen me, and he did nothing. The champagne flute in my hand was cold, beaded with condensation. My fingers tightened around the stem as decades of absence and distance pressed down on me. The laughter from the reception floated in faintly, mixing with the clink of glassware. I placed the untouched champagne on the table and reached into my clutch. The phone felt solid in my hand, familiar. I pressed one number. Victor answered on the second ring. "Cancel the $28 million. Real estate deal. Lucas is planning to announce tonight," I said, voice steady, calm. A pause. "Understood," he replied. I closed the phone and slid it back into my clutch. The kitchen door swung open again, letting in a slice of golden light. I sat back, letting the muffled music wash over me. Outside, they danced and laughed, toasting to a future they believed was theirs. Inside that small room, I let the quiet settle around me. It was not defeat. It was the first move. I was 38 when my husband died, leaving me with a mortgage, a 4-year-old boy, and a heart hollowed out. There was no insurance windfall, no family fortune to soften the blow. What I had was a dining room table, a second-hand drafting lamp, and a degree in interior architecture I had yet to use. At night after Lucas slept, I spread tracing paper across the table, sharpening pencils, telling myself that one day these lines would become something solid. Clients came slowly at first. Neighbors wanted porches enclosed. A cousin of a friend needed a restaurant facelift. I drafted contracts in the same spot where I set out breakfast, moving cereal bowls to make room for blueprints. Lucas learned early how to nap through the rotary phone, small body curled on the couch while I negotiated tile samples and paint colors. He called my leather portfolio Mom's Magic Folder. Every time I zipped it closed, he asked if it meant I had made money for groceries. By the time he reached high school, Hayes & Co. had become a name people recognized. Our work appeared in magazines. I had a staff of 10 and a studio. overlooking the Ashley River. Lucas would stop by after soccer practice, muddy sneakers pressing against wood floors, pointing at sketches pinned to walls. I thought we were building something together. When he met Harper, I tried to welcome her. Sharp, ambitious, always dressed for a photo shoot. At first, I believed her interest genuine, but soon noticed subtle shifts. My signature wallpaper collection was rebranded under a new name. Brochures circulated with her photograph in place of mine. Invitations for the annual Legacy Brunch went to board members. Investors, junior designers, but never to me. I told myself it was oversight, maybe a fresh marketing approach. Slowly, the truth seeped in like water through foundation until cracks appeared. I was on the letterhead, asked occasionally for photographs, but decisions were no longer mine. Meetings occurred without me. Clients I nurtured for decades spoke of Lucas as if he had built the firm himself. It was not one grand betrayal, but a series of small, deliberate erasures, each wrapped in politeness. 2 weeks before the wedding, Harper's assistant called my estate manager with a breezy tone, rattling off a list of family heirlooms. The bride's stylist would pick up my grandmother's sapphire ring, my mother's ivory comb, a diamond brooch worn by every generation. She claimed I had given approval. I had not. Ruth brought the message with a questioning look. I said, "Let them have what they think they are entitled to. Sometimes people reveal themselves fully when they believe you will not stop them." That night, I imagined Harper in front of her mirror, turning to admire the comb and ring. It was useful to see how comfortable someone could get with what was not theirs. On the wedding day, the air was thick and warm, champagne glasses clinking on the lawn. Harper posed in the bridal suite, cameras flashing, letting heirlooms glint in the light. Ruth stood in the doorway, posture straight, voice calm. Mrs. Hayes requests the return of all heirloom items from her personal vault immediately. Harper laughed, but one by one, removed the ring and comb, placing them in the velvet pouch Ruth offered. 10 minutes later, I held the pouch. Sapphire cool, comb smooth from years of use. These were not ornaments. They were proof of my lineage, my history. My boundaries were no longer negotiable. The morning after, I called Victor. Put a hold on all outgoing wedding gift transfers tied to my name. Harper had listed me as sponsor for nearly every lavish registry item. I never approved a single one. Accounts froze. Vendors received polite final notices. By afternoon, Charleston whispered, the Hayes matriarch was cleaning house. Friends of Harper stepped back. Invitations went unmailed. Stability had shifted. That evening, I sat in my library, the golden light falling just right across my desk, highlighting the fine grain of leather-bound books and the faint, comforting scent of old paper. Ruth entered quietly, carrying a thin folder, her movements precise as always. These are the people still calling to check in, she said, laying the folder before me. I scanned the names slowly. Some were expected, longtime clients, old friends, but a few surprised me. Each of them had recognized me first, not the firm. Each name represented a thread connecting the past to the present, a lifeline I would not allow to fray. I realized then that this was the long game. One does not announce every move. One observes, waits, and when the time comes, shifts the board quietly so that by the time anyone notices, the game is already won. Victor's office smelled faintly of cedar and strong coffee when I entered. He closed the door behind me, a signal that whatever we discussed would remain confidential. I told him I wanted to amend my will. The bulk of the estate would be redirected to a scholarship fund for women from underrepresented backgrounds pursuing architecture. Lucas would receive a modest living allowance, enough to keep him comfortable, but never enough to grant him control over another's future. Victor nodded solemnly and began drafting, understanding implicitly that there would be no second chances. Ruth later confided what she had overheard in the garden. Harper speaking casually to a friend on the phone, plotting how easy it would be to prove I was slipping, so a judge might hand over my assets. The words were casual, but the intention clear. I was merely an obstacle, someone to be maneuvered around rather than respected. I processed the weight of that quietly, methodically. From that moment on, every conversation with Lucas or Harper was meticulously documented. I dictated summaries into a recorder each night, dating and signing them before sealing them in envelopes for Victor's files. Financial access codes were changed. Accounts moved to institutions with stricter security. Ruth coordinated audits down to the secondary keys to the wine cellar. It was not fear that drove me, it was clarity. This was no longer only about wealth. It was about ensuring my name, my work, and my story could never be rewritten by those who had not earned the right to hold them. By the end of the week, the scholarship trust was signed and funded. I left Victor's office with certainty. My legacy now belonged solely to me, and no one could take it without passing through every locked door. I had just fortified. The knock came late that afternoon when the lake was still, and the light had softened to a warm gold. I opened the door to see Lucas standing there alone. His suit was rumpled, shoulders drawn, his face stripped of the polished shine that once made him almost untouchable in social circles. He admitted he had lost nearly everything. Harper was gone. Deals had fallen through. Friends had disappeared. He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded piece of paper, edges worn from being handled too often. Inside was a crayon drawing from his childhood, a stick figure of me in an apron, holding a hammer labeled, "My mom is a builder and a heart for the O." His voice caught as he whispered, "I'm sorry, not only for the wedding, but for letting someone else decide what you meant to me." I told him that forgiveness does not erase the past. It gives both of us a chance to build something better. I suggested he start by joining one of the community projects funded by my scholarship program. He nodded, hesitant but sincere. Within a week, he was teaching design basics to a group of school children, helping them paint benches and repair a playground. Each day I watched him grow, not just as my son, but as a man learning responsibility, patience, and the importance of contributing to something larger than himself. A month later, we stood side by side at the site of a library renovation, watching volunteers measure shelves and sand window frames. The sunlight poured through the tall glass, catching the dust in the air like gold flecks. I looked at Lucas and said he was still my son. Then I asked to see what he could build. His smile was tentative at first, then broader, more confident, a reflection of the boy I had once carried on my hip. For the first time in years, I believed we might find a way forward, one careful step at a time. As the weeks turned into months, Lucas became more involved in the scholarship program, attending interviews, reviewing applications, and mentoring young women aspiring to careers in architecture. His demeanor changed. Gone was the arrogance he had inherited from years of privilege. In its place was humility, curiosity, and genuine desire to learn. I watched him guide students in understanding structural integrity, color palettes, and spatial planning. Each moment reminded me of the early days of Hayes & Co., when I would sit up late with tracing paper, pencils, and dreams that seemed almost impossible. Meanwhile, Charleston began to take notice. Word of my actions, freezing accounts, redirecting wealth to scholarships, holding my ground against manipulation, spread quietly but steadily. I received messages from former colleagues, students, and friends thanking me for setting an example, for asserting boundaries, and for showing that integrity and diligence could not be overlooked. Some offered support, some requested mentorship, and I realized something vital. Legacy is not merely about the tangible things one leaves behind. It is about the people, the lessons, the structures, both literal and metaphorical, that one builds and nurtures. Harper's absence became a lesson in itself. Without her influence, Lucas experienced firsthand the importance of earning respect, rather than assuming it. He learned to navigate the complexities of interpersonal relationships, corporate responsibility, and personal integrity. And slowly, he began to understand the subtle ways. I had shaped him, not just with rules or lectures, but through example, through the quiet insistence on excellence and fairness, through the careful calibration of persistence and grace. Evenings in the house regained a sense of calm. I would sit by the window, the river glinting in the fading light, and reflect on the years, the pain, the struggle, the subtle betrayals, and the triumphs. Memories of my husband surfaced, sometimes tender and bittersweet, a reminder of beginnings that had shaped everything that followed. I would think of Lucas as a child, tracing lines on paper, calling my portfolio his magic folder, and marvel at the resilience that had carried us both to this point. The story of Hayes & Co., my family, and my legacy was no longer vulnerable to outside manipulation. I had ensured the structures I built, both physical and emotional, were secure. And more than that, I had given Lucas a path, a chance to redeem not only himself, but also the bond between mother and son that had once seemed frayed beyond repair. In those quiet moments, I understood that power is not merely about control or wealth. It is about clarity, decisiveness, and knowing one's own worth. And I realized that I had finally reclaimed all of it, not with force, but with patience, strategy, and unwavering belief in myself. As the months turned into a year, Lucas and I continued our work together. We stood at the opening of community libraries, landscape playgrounds, and inaugurated scholarship programs. Each project carried a piece of our shared history, a tangible symbol of reconciliation, learning, and growth. The golden light of Charleston's sunsets often caught us on sight, dust motes sparkling like tiny stars around us, and I would smile quietly, knowing that the future was not only secure but also brighter, because we had rebuilt it with care. And so, standing at the intersection of past and future, I finally understood the fullness of legacy. It is not the wealth one leaves behind, nor the accolades written in magazines. It is the lives touched, the lessons imparted, and the integrity maintained even when tested. I looked at Lucas, now grown, reflective, and responsible, and saw not just my son, but a continuation of everything I had built. Not a replacement, not a rival, but a true extension of the values and resilience I had fought so hard to preserve. The music of Charleston drifted, faintly in the background, as the sun dipped below the river, painting the city in shades of copper and gold. I inhaled deeply, the scent of magnolia mingling with the calm of accomplishment. I was Eloise Hayes, 72, and for the first time in decades I felt the quiet, profound satisfaction of knowing my story, my work, my love, my legacy, was entirely my own.